Ahoy there, fellow adventurers, and welcome aboard for a deep dive into a D&D setting that's,
Well,
let's just say it's a little further out than most.
yeah,
We're talking about Spelljammer,
right.
a world where magic and spaceships collide. Now, whether you're a seasoned spacefarer or you're just starting to chart a course through the astral sea, get ready for a wild ride because we're about to blast off into a universe where the impossible is just a spell-jamming helm away.
Yeah, let's do it.
A huge thank you to Lit RPG Reads and to Paul Bello for providing the star charts for this incredible journey. You know Paul, fine fellow, always did have a knack for unearthing the most fascinating corners of the D&D multiverse.
He really does.
Speaking of fascinating corners,
Yeah.
this whole idea of Spelljammer, it really takes me back. Back to a time when my own D&D group stumbled into a situation so strange, so unexpected, that it could have only happened in a setting like Spelljammer. We're in the middle of this epic dungeon crawl, right?
Ah.
Swords drawn, torches flickering, the whole 9 yards. And we round a corner, expecting to find a treasure chamber or maybe a fearsome monster, but instead we find a portal, a swirling vortex of energy just hanging in midair.
Oh, wow.
Actually, we do what any self-respecting group of adventurers would do. We throw caution to the wind and jump right in. Next thing we know, we're tumbling through this kaleidoscope of colors and light, and then bam! We land splat in the middle of a celestial banquet being held on the back of a giant space turtle.
What?
Talking platters of glowing fruit, goblets overflowing with stardust wine, and all these strange, wonderful creatures just staring at us like we were the weird ones.
That's fantastic.
It was pure chaos, completely unexpected, and it taught me one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned about D&D and about Spelljammer in particular. Sometimes the best stories are the ones you could never have planned for.
So true. What's fascinating here is that Spelljammer takes everything we love about fantasy, the magic, the monsters, the epic quests, and launches it into the vast expanse of space. Imagine a world where elves sail crystal ships through the astral sea, where dwarves mine asteroids for precious metals, and where you might just bump into a beholder piloting a ship made entirely of severed hands. It's a setting that throws out the rulebook and says, if you can dream it, you can play it.
It's D&D meets Guardians of the Galaxy, with a dash of Monty Python thrown in for good measure.
And that's what makes it so captivating for so many players, wouldn't you say? It's that sense of wonder, that anything goes attitude that you just don't find in every setting. You could be exploring the ruins of a fallen empire on a jungle planet one day and then be caught in the middle of a space pirate chase through an asteroid field the next. The possibilities are truly limitless.
And you're not kidding about the anything goes part, are you? Because when it comes to the creatures of Spelljammer, just say it's not your average monster manual.
Not at all. Spelljammer is home to some of the most bizarre and wonderfully weird creatures in the D&D multiverse. We're talking about the GIF, for example, humanoids with the heads of hippos, obsessed with gunpowder and military precision. They're a force to be reckoned with, I can tell you that.
They do love their cannons, that's for sure. I once saw If try to solve a negotiation by firing a cannon filled with confetti. Didn't end well for the table, let's just say that.
It's all part of the charm.
Yeah.
And then you have the Shitchill, a race of praying mantis-like beings who are, ironically, master shipwrights. They're incredibly meticulous, incredibly patient, and they build some of the most extraordinary ships in wildspace.
It's like someone took all the weirdest, wildest ideas from a D&D brainstorming session and said, let's make them all neighbors and then launch them into space. But it's not just the creatures that are out there, is it? You mentioned wild space and the astral sea. We're talking about a whole cosmos to explore, right?
Absolutely. Imagine, if you will, a vast sea of swirling silver energy that's the astral sea, and floating within the sea are crystal spheres. Think of them like giant bubbles containing entire worlds and their own sets of rules, their own unique flavors of magic, and their own strange denizens. It's like having an entire D&D campaign setting contained within a single sphere and then having countless spheres all connected by this shimmering ethereal sea.
And I can just imagine the look on a player's face when their characters first encounter that. It's mind-blowing, right? This isn't just your typical go on a quest and kill the dragon kind of setting. This is a whole new level of epic. And speaking of epic, we can't forget about the most iconic part of Spelljammer, the spelljamming ships themselves. This isn't your typical fantasy setting where ships are just a way to get from point A to point B. In Spelljammer, the ship is practically a character in its own right.
What's captivating about Spelljammer ships is that they're an extension of the party's identity. They're a home away from home, a mobile base of operations, and often the stage for some of the most memorable adventures. And forget about your traditional sailing vessels or even flying ships, though those exist too. We're talking about anything from gargantuan flying skulls spewing fire and dread to enchanted forests drifting through the void, complete with their own ecosystems.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this. We've got ships made of ice, living ships grown from magical seeds, maybe even a giant rogue beholder using its anti-magic cone to steer through the astral sea. It's like the laws of physics decided to take a vacation permanently.
That's one way to put it. And the key to it all, the thing that makes this wild form of space travel possible, is the spelljamming helm. Imagine a magical artifact, often shaped like a throne or an elaborate helm, that responds to a spellcaster's will, quite literally translating their magical energy into directional force.
So if I've got a powerful enough wizard on my crew and access to some seriously potent magic items, I could theoretically turn, say, a flying castle into a spelljamming ship?
You absolutely could. And think about the implications of that, not just for adventure, but for the sheer logistics involved. Crewing a spelljamming ship isn't just about knowing your port from your starboard. It's about maintaining magical engines, navigating treacherous spatial currents, and maybe even fending off boarders from rival ships, all while keeping your vessel afloat in the astral sea. It adds a whole new layer of complexity and excitement to the game.
It's like running a fantasy airship, but a million times more chaotic and with a good dose of cosmic horror thrown in for good measure. But even with all this talk about ships and strange creatures, we haven't really delved into the history of Spelljammer itself. How did this wild setting come to be?
Well, to understand Spelljammer, we need to journey back to the early days of Dungeons & Dragons. Back to the era of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, 2nd edition to be exact. It was 1989, a time when D&D wasn't afraid to experiment, to embrace the strange and wonderful corners of its multiverse. And Spelljammer emerged, a bold declaration that space fantasy had a place in the world of D&D, offering something completely new to players.
It's funny, for a setting all about pushing boundaries, it debuted in the, if you'll pardon the pun, somewhat grounded format of a boxed set. Not exactly the image that comes to mind when you think of spaceships and cosmic adventures.
It's true. Those early box sets were more about establishing the rules of the game, how spelljamming worked, and introducing players to the major races and factions. It wasn't until later supplements and, of course, the novels that the setting really began to spread its wings, so to speak.
And spread its wings it did, because even though Spelljammer had its heyday in 2nd edition, it's incredible how its influence has echoed through later editions of D&D, even if just as a mode of travel between planes.
You're absolutely right, and that enduring appeal is a testament to the dedication of Spelljammer's fan base. Even when the official support waned, the fans kept the spirit alive through homebrew content, online communities, and a shared love for this quirky, boundless setting. It speaks to the power of imagination that Spelljammer sparked, a power that couldn't be contained by edition changes or the passage of time.
It really goes to show that a good setting can take on a life of its own, even if it's not always in the spotlight. But we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about how Spelljammer ventured beyond the tabletop, at least for a little while. I'm talking about the novels, of course. While they might not have reached the same level of fame as, say, Dragonlance or Forgotten Realms novels, they offered a unique glimpse into this bizarre and wonderful universe.
Absolutely. Those novels give us a chance to dive deeper into the lore, to experience Spelljammer through the eyes of memorable characters like Teldin Moore, the unlikely hero of the Cloakmaster cycle.
You're a simple farmer, living a quiet life, when suddenly you're thrust into a cosmic adventure involving a magical cloak, alien races, and a conspiracy that spans the stars. Talk about a life-changing event.
That's the beauty of Spelljammer, isn't it? It takes the familiar and hurls it into the unknown. Speaking of hurling things into the unknown, I think we need to address the elephant in the room, or should I say the video game, in the realm space. I'm talking, of course, about Spelljammer, Pirates of Realm Space, a game that even the most die-hard Spelljammer fan might struggle to defend.
Yes, that game. It's almost become a badge of honor among Spelljammer enthusiasts to acknowledge its shortcomings. While it tried to capture the spirit of swashbuckling adventure and ship-to-ship combat, it unfortunately became bogged down by technical issues, repetitive gameplay, and a certain lack of polish. It's a shame, really, because the potential was there.
It just goes to show that even beloved settings can have their missteps, right? But let's not dwell on the negative. As we wrap up our deep dive into Spelljammer, I think what resonates most is the sheer sense of wonder and limitless possibility that it embodies. It's a setting that encourages you to throw out the rulebook, to embrace the strange and unexpected, and to chart your own course through a universe where magic makes the impossible possible.
I couldn't agree more. And that, I think, is the enduring allure of Spelljammer. It's a setting that belongs to the dreamers, the tinkerers, the players, and game masters who dare to ask, what if? What if dragons soared through the astral sea? What if a humble tea kettle could be transformed into a vessel capable of interstellar travel? What if magic was the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe?
Those what-ifs are what keep the spirit of Spelljammer alive, even today. So to all of you listening, we encourage you go out there and explore those possibilities. Dust off those old Spelljammer books, fire up your imagination, and gather your crew, because the Astral Sea is vast and it's waiting for you to chart a course through its shimmering currents.
And don't forget,
Yeah,
keep an eye out for those space hamsters. They're out there, I tell you. Out there.
You know, it's funny. We're talking about a setting where you can have spaceships powered by singing crystals, where you can encounter creatures literally made of nightmares. But for some reason, the thing that always captures my imagination the most is those crystal spheres. It's the idea that each one is a self-contained universe, a microcosm of possibility with its own rules, its own cultures, its own stories, just waiting to be told. It's like each sphere is a blank canvas, and you, the players and the game masters, get to be the artists. You can create anything you can imagine within those spheres.
And isn't that what's so great about Spelljammer? It takes the traditional idea of a fantasy world and turns it inside out by putting these worlds inside these crystal spheres.
Right, and it makes you wonder what kinds of worlds are out there. A world ruled by sentient plants, or a world where gravity works in reverse.
Or a world where the sun never sets.
Now you're talking. The possibilities really are endless.
And that's what makes Spelljammer so inspiring.
Yeah.
It encourages that boundless creativity. And you know what else?
What's that?
We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the sense of community around Spelljammer. Even though the setting isn't always in the spotlight, the fans have never let it die.
Absolutely. Even when official support for Spelljammer wasn't there, fans were creating homebrew content, running their own games, keeping the spirit alive.
It's really remarkable.
It really is. It's a testament to the power of a good setting, to the power of shared imagination.
At the end of the day, that's what Spelljammer is all about, wouldn't you say? It's about coming together and saying, we want to tell stories in a universe where anything is possible, a universe where magic and spaceships can coexist, where there's no line between science fiction and fantasy.
It's about looking up at the stars, not with just a telescope, but with a telescope in one hand and a spellbook in the other, realizing that out there, anything is possible.
I like that.
Yeah.
Anything is possible. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive.
I agree. It's been a wild ride through the Astral Sea.
It has. But before we go, I want to encourage all of you listening, go out there and explore those possibilities. Dust off those old Spelljammer books, fire up your imaginations, gather your crew, and set sail for adventure.
Well said. The Astral Sea is vast, and it's waiting for you to chart a course through it. And of course, a huge thank you to Paul Beller-Finefellow for being our guide on this incredible journey through the stars. Until next time, may your dice rolls be ever in your favor, and may your spelljamming ships never run out of wind, or magic, as the case may be.